Good afternoon, how's everyone doing? Sometimes, thank you for choosing this session. My name is Chris Warwick. I'm an architect at the Microsoft Technology Center.
Hi, I'm Christine Comment. I'm a product manager on the SharePoint team.
I'm Joanna. I'm also product manager at working.
And we're here to take this afternoon to talk about the SharePoint and how you can maximize the value of your content with AI-powered content processing. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk a little bit about industry trends and observations. We're going to go through 3 scenarios. We're going to frame this around 3 different user scenarios and user stories around business process automation, content migration, and how we can collect electronic signatures. Spend a little bit of time on roadmap, and if we have time at the end, we're happy to take some questions here. We're also happy if you want to meet us at the booth. I know this is the first day of the conference, so tomorrow and Thursday, also this evening, if folks have deep questions, we're happy to take them. So, content is the lifeblood of every organization. I've been joking that Microsoft runs on trust. I come from Boston, we talk about America runs on Dunkin'. I believe that Copilot runs on content. Is the way I think about it. Think about how Copilot works and how it's grounded in different things. Really, the content is what makes Copilot what it is. But I hear so many customers talking about generative AI. There's so many different concepts out there that traditional AI can apply as well. We've been doing a lot of work in artificial intelligence in the SharePoint platform for many years. Jeff talked this morning about how SharePoint and Microsoft 365 is really the content services layer for all Microsoft 365. He mentioned that there are now 2.5 billion documents per day uploaded into Microsoft 365. And it's funny, this slide was made about 18 months ago. So 18 months ago, we were uploading about $500 million documents less per day into SharePoint, just in the last 18 months. And we're seeing significant growth on unstructured data. Again, it's kind of funny looking back in time, and IBC was projecting by 2025, which is just next year, about 80 to 90% of growth will be through unstructured data. But many of us have been working with unstructured data for a while, and organizations on average are spending a significant amount of money. We've estimated around $59 billion per year are spent on managing content. How many of you have been working with SharePoint for more than 10 years? More than 20 years? All right, so this is something that we've been working with for many, many years. This is not unique to LiftOff, but certainly the way the content is being created and generated is just an exponential growth. Now, the other thing I'm saying is when people are classifying content, there's typically 3 ways that we see people classifying content, 3 reasons. Anyone want to guess what 3 reasons why you might classify content? Anybody?
Findability.
Findability, yeah. So someone can go back and find and use the content, that's one. What's another reason you might classify content? Why might you label content? Security. So people have encrypted access to the content. What's the 3rd reason why you might label content? Find it, secure it, destroy it, right? Retention policies. Making sure that content is going to be preserved for as long as we need to keep it. With this significant amount of data, it's really, really challenging to make sure the content is being properly classified and tagged so people can find it. People can make sure it's secure and protected, which is super important as we talk more about Copilot and how people secure and protect and get ready for Copilot, but also making sure content is being properly retained. Now, SharePoint, I've been working with SharePoint since around 2001. I know many of you have been on this journey. It's really grown up by being an enterprise content management and a web content management platform. Now, SharePoint powers so many experiences across Microsoft 365. Certainly, it's embedded and working very closely with the Office applications, whether it's the desktop clients, the mobile clients, the browser-based clients. SharePoint is powering and running behind many experiences like Microsoft Teams. So as folks know, if you're working with Teams, it creates a group, creates a SharePoint site, creates channels. Those documents live inside of a SharePoint document. If you're in Outlook, hopefully using modern attachments, you're not sending classic attachments around. Those modern attachments live somewhere. That could be SharePoint, that could be your OneDrive for Business site. Really, the evolution was the old My site many, many years ago. More and more other applications are placing bet on SharePoint as the content management layer. Things like Beaver Engage, formerly Yammer. Significant growth in video by Microsoft Stream and now Stream 2.0 or Stream on SharePoint. All of those meetings that are recorded in Teams, those live event meetings, those ad hoc meetings, those are being stored inside of Office 365, inside of SharePoint and OneDrive. And then certainly powering web content management. So as we think about content management and the growth of content, it's not just Office documents. It's videos, it's images, basic Microsoft Whiteboard, Loop components, building applications on SharePoint, with things like SharePoint Embedded to actually build your custom user experience. And SharePoint is powering so much of that experience. And there's really three main scenarios and categories of things we're going to talk about here. One is just the challenge as a human to deal with information overload. Think about all the content that's there. How many of you are finding that, how many metadata columns today in your SharePoint document libraries? How many of you set your fields as mandatory? And how many don't do it because most people don't fill in the fields, right? So it's one of the challenges. As much as we've been trying, this is a journey, this is not unique to SharePoint as we know. I've been in the industry about 30 years. I've worked with a bunch of different enterprise content management platforms. Getting people to tag content is a challenge. It's simply the what's in it for me. Why am I going to tag it? How do they tag it? They drop it in a folder. And yes, we can tag things with folder-based metadata defaults, and that's a great thing. But really, if there's no incentive, there's no value to properly tag the content, it's a challenge. Now, if we can get the content tagged properly, when it's being ingested, or we can use things to actually, again, extract information, put it in a column, makes it easier to be reused and shared. The second risk is around loss of information. And yes, if you can say you can't find the content's lost, because people are recreating content, it's so difficult to find it. The loss of information is a risk because content is not properly labeled for security purposes. You have a document that's labeled as highly confidential. It's not labeled with retention policy that says that HR document is labeled as highly confidential employee information, and then tagged with an HR retention policy that says we will destroy the content after X number of days, weeks, months, or years. So labeling the content is important, not just for humans to get back to find it, but to make sure we're securing, protecting it, and governing it. The third reason is around loss of productivity. Again, how many of you are building documents that you're taking the document, doing a save as, you're opening the document, you're trying to global replace to actually add content in there? I worked in an insurance company for many years, and one of my first jobs was making sure that the PC was rebooted every day, so the word automation was going properly to create policy documents. This was back about 30 years ago, and I said my job was to make sure the dialog box got closed so that Word could keep processing content. But what if we could actually extract metadata from documents, put it into a document library as metadata, as columns, and then leverage templates to actually take that information that's locked in the documents, drive process automation for maybe a workflow for review, and then build that into a document template. So those are some of the scenarios we're going to walk through this afternoon. So why SharePoint? Again, SharePoint, as I mentioned, is really that core enterprise content management, web content management layer. You'll see that we've been building a significant amount of investment around artificial intelligence. Again, certainly the work we're doing with Copilot and generative AI, we're making sure that what I call traditional AI, those services are still valid, they're still needed. You're going to see some ways we're doing this where we can help you with maximizing the value of your content by automating the way we extract information. And then building that into the user experiences to provide business process automation, including electronic signature. All while making sure that we're protecting your information, we're applying the correct information protection labels, we're doing data loss prevention, we're tagging things with retention policies, so we can provide proper data governance. So with that, I'm going to bring Kristen back on the stage, and she's going to walk us through the scenarios.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, today we're going to walk through 3 scenarios where SharePoint content processing is transformational to the way that you get work done. The first scenario is going to be around business process automation, and for this, we're going to focus around a scenario where we're processing invoices. The second one is around organizing your content, and for this, you can imagine there's many scenarios where you need to organize your content, but for this, we're going to focus around a scenario where you're doing a migration. And the last scenario that we're going to look at is the end-to-end process with collecting eSignatures on documents. Okay, so business process automation. Imagine that your job at Contoso is to process invoices. You ask your team to upload invoices to a library, and you need to make sure that those invoices have all the correct information within them. You need to make sure that those invoices are approved by the right approvers, and then you need to process those for payment. And you need to make sure that you have done all of your diligence so that if there is ever an audit, you can go back and refine those invoices. So this is the vanilla experience in SharePoint today. They've uploaded all of the files to this library, and now you have to get get on with all that workflow. You have to open each document, look through it, find the required information. The invoices might be in different formats, so you're looking in different places on the doc for that information. Then you have to figure out, well, who needs to approve it? Well, depending on what information is in the invoice, you might need this approver or that approver. And all of that has to be kept straight in the user's brain who is actually analyzing these invoices. So this is where SharePoint content processing can be transformational. With SharePoint content processing, your library might look like this. Now, nobody has added this metadata. People on your team just uploaded those files into SharePoint, and all of this metadata was automatically populated. And you can see how it helps you get your work done. The first few columns, customer name, due date, invoice total, was automatically extracted from those documents. So that if you need to find the documents that are from a certain customer or have due dates in a certain time range, all of that is pulled into metadata where you can do all the things that Chris talked about. You can search on it, you can use it for automation, and you can see at a glance, like what things are where. The next column that we see is invoice readiness for payment. This is really interesting. We said before that you needed to make sure that all of the information that needed to be in that invoice is there. Here you can see in this column, there's information about whether the invoice itself is missing information, whether there are things that need to be populated still, whether the invoice is complete. And this column is telling you if it needs approval and who does it need approval for. So all of this is the AI working on your behalf so that mental load is not on you. You can think about the previous experience where they were doing all of this manually, and that could be very error-prone and arduous, and it would be very slow. And this is automating all of that right from the get-go. Here again, you see all that information governance that's automatically applied, the correct sensitivity labels, and the correct retention label, based on the understanding of what that document is. Okay, now let's look at how SharePoint content processing was working behind the scenes to get that information into the library. Well, you remember the first three columns that we saw were customer name, due date, and invoice total. Where did those come from? Well, a pre-built model was automatically applied to that library to understand that information on an invoice. So Azure Cognitive Services built these pre-built models trained on thousands and thousands of documents of different layouts and formats, and it extracts what we know is important for information on an invoice. There's 30 different entities that it will extract, and it will put those into metadata, and you can use the metadata that you want. And we've adopted 3 of these models in SharePoint content processing. So we can do this over invoices, receipts, and contracts. The next thing that's happening behind the scenes is we saw this cool column that was called invoice readiness for payment. And it told you if there was missing information or if all the information was already needed, that was required was needed. All the information that was required was in the invoice, and it told you where it needed to go for approval. How did we do that? Well, with autofill columns, you're able to write a prompt in natural language, just like you would tell it to me. You can write it in the prompt here about how you want this document to be labeled. So in this example, it says, look for information about the due date and about the customer. Maybe you're looking for a correct address. And then, if that information is not there, then label it as it's missing information. If all of that information is there, then mark it as complete. And if the invoice total is over a certain amount, maybe $2,000, it needs finance approval, so mark it as needing finance approval. And if it's with this vendor that we have a relationship with, maybe it needs that vendor manager approval on that invoice before that invoice can be paid. So you just have to write the logic that you want around this processing once and put it into your autofill columns, and autofill will do the work to surface up to you what is the next action that needs to happen. Autofill columns is a very versatile feature. You can use it for a variety of scenarios. Some examples of this are if you want to classify the document, If you want to extract information from the document, you can write a prompt to do that. You can generate a free-form analysis like a summary, and you can have it analyze a document with your rules to help you know what is the next action to take. And that's the example that we see here. Autofill, you don't have to worry too much about whether you've written the prompt correctly. Also, we have a way that you can write the prompt in natural language, and then you can test the prompt by adding a document right here and clicking test, and you can see if you get the right classification. In this example, we used a choice column, and these were the only 4 classifications that we wanted, but you might have many more classifications based on your use case. Okay, another content processing capability working behind the scenes is OCR. So you might imagine that some of these invoices are actually scanned documents. So those are documents that just contain images. Today, in SharePoint, you wouldn't be able to search on those. But with SharePoint content processing working behind the scenes, we extract the text from the images within the documents, the scanned documents, and we make them available for search so that end users can use a keyword search and find them, and we also make that available for Copilot. So if you want to ask a question about a document, you can ask a question about an image-based document as well, and Copilot will give you responses. Okay, so that's some of the content processing that was working behind the scenes, but SharePoint also has some advanced content management capabilities that will help you complete your end-to-end scenario. So one example of this is, let's say that when we have the invoices become approved, somebody opened those invoices and found out that actually there was an issue with this invoice. Well, now in SharePoint you can annotate that invoice, and then that can help facilitate a conversation around like, hey, this looks off. We might need to send this back to the vendor for revision or whatever we want to do without modifying that document of record. So we said, maybe there's a problem with the invoice. Maybe we need to communicate back to the vendor that they need to update the way that that invoice looks. Content assembly allows us to create standard document templates, ensuring like consistency and compliance in how we communicate with these vendors about the changes that are needed. And so this will help you because if you have like many users that are creating these letters, if you want to use a certain type of language and you want everyone to update the language that they're using, you can just update the template. And the other advantage of content assembly is you can create these letters very quickly and accurately. So the fields that you see here can be auto-populated from Microsoft lists, they can be auto-populated from library metadata, and so that way when you want to create the letter back to the vendor, you can say, okay, well, it's for this invoice number, and you'll see in the list, okay, this invoice number was associated with this purchase order number, was associated with this vendor address was this, and populate all of that into the letter. Okay, so now we have the letter we want to send to the vendor, and we have the invoice that has the issue. So now we might want to merge those two into one document to send to the vendor to ask them for revision. With SharePoint PDF merge and extract capabilities, you can merge those two documents together and then send that to the vendor. And you can do that with one click right here from the viewer. Another common scenario that you'll have with invoice management is you might have one document that contains many invoices. And maybe you want to manage those invoices separately. Well, you can use this PDF extract feature to extract that large document into many invoices that can be managed separately. And you don't have to use third-party tools for this or take the content out of SharePoint. Okay, so we said that SharePoint content processing adds a bunch of really useful metadata to your library. One great example of how this is useful is you can create really powerful searches based on that metadata. So you see in here the invoice font names are not very descriptive, and keyword search is only going to get us so far. But now that we have these key value pairs that are associated with the document, we can have a much richer search where we're looking for all of the invoices over a certain amount, all of the invoices that do not contain complete, so they're not complete. You can look for very specific and targeted searches with content query. So what did we see in this business process automation scenario? We saw the invoice pre-built working to extract key information from within the invoice. We saw autofill columns for checking the required information in the document and figuring out the next action that needs to be taken. We saw OCR, which made the text in images within documents available in search and for Copilot. And we saw annotation on the content management side. We saw annotation to facilitate discussion and review on the document. We saw content assembly, which allowed us to generate a letter quickly, accurately, and with consistent language. PDF merge and extract allowed us to manipulate PDFs from within the SharePoint UX. And content query allowed us to create really powerful queries that targeted specific information about a document. Okay, so we talked about business process automation and through the scenario of invoices. Now we're going to move to our second scenario, which is around organizing your content. And for this one, there's many reasons you might organize your content. Maybe people are using it as a dumping ground, like maybe it just gets out of whack. Or maybe in this scenario, we'll focus around a migration. So this might be migrating content from another place, or it could be migrating content into the cloud. What are some things you might think about? You might think, oh, this is a mess. I wonder what we even have. You might think, does all of this information need to come to SharePoint? I'm not sure. I want to bring it all with me. You might think, how will I organize this, given the constructs of SharePoint? And you might think, when I bring this to SharePoint, how am I going to protect my sensitive information from being overshared? Well, SharePoint content processing can help with all of this. So again here's an example of a library where you might have like one library that is your drop-off library where you have a mess of content that you put in there and you need to organize it. What you see here is we have a classification column, which is telling us what kind of content is this. Is it a best practice? Is it a financial document? Is it an invoice? Is it some type of contract? Whatever the documents that are important for your organization. Then you might want to say, okay, well, what's inside these documents? And you know, when you're doing this type of work, it's a lot of figuring out what's what, and it's many clicks to open, read, figure out, and then move. So here you have a quick summary just telling you what's inside the document. Image tags tell you what's inside images. So are these images of like a company event with people in it, or is this images of documents or pictures of business cards? The next column tells you the geo. So maybe in your organization, it's really important to know which documents are associated with which geos, because that's how you want to organize your content. And then you see a column here for language. So it might be important for you to know which of these documents are not in the company's main language in case they need to be translated so that other people within the organization can read them. And again, data governance. We have our columns here for the sensitivity and retention labels. So once we know what the content is, we can apply those labels, and that's right there from the get-go. All right, now let's look at SharePoint content processing working behind the scenes again. So the first column that we saw here was document classification. So we wrote a prompt here that said, these are the important types of documents that I want to be labeled in my drop-off library here. So let's say that I think that there's some best practices that need special treatment. I think there's invoices that need special treatment. And I have a very simple prompt here, which is like, if it mentions this, label it as this, which at least gets me in the right direction for what I need to do next. But you can have a more advanced prompt just based on whatever it is that you're looking for in the document. And you can see this is like just natural language. You don't have to be like very clever to figure out how are you going to write the prompt about what you need, what metadata you want in the library. Anyone can do it. If you can say it, you can write it, and you can do it. So here's what's happening here. You classify the document, and if it meets none of the criteria, maybe you classify it as other. Okay, the next column that we saw here was a summary. So an interesting little hack you can do with summarization when you put it in the metadata column is limit the character count, or limit the word count that you want to put into the column. So here I said summarize the document in less than 20 words. Less than 20 words you can scan in a metadata column versus like if you wanted a depth summary that you might see in another UX. So I was able to do that, and now I can scan and see what's inside each document. And here we see autofill again. Autofill wears many hats, right? Like autofill, tell me the next action. Autofill, give me a summary. This one, autofill, tell me the language that this document is in. And look at how simple the prompt was. Tell me the language. And here it is. Tell me it's German or it's English or whatever the language is. In this one, you might want to automatically tag your content based on information that's important for your business. So in SharePoint, we have a concept of taxonomy. So you can use taxonomy to create important categories for your business. So this could be like the product lines that are important for your business. It could be the geos and how your company is organized. You can set that all up in taxonomy. And taxonomy is really powerful because when you search, it can search through a hierarchy. So if you look for a child term, it'll help you find the parent term. And it also works with synonyms. We're making that powerful taxonomy in your organization be automated and automatically added to your content. So in this example, I've chosen that it's important for me to know what geo is associated with these documents, and so I assign it to that term set of my organization, and I say automatically apply those terms. And it goes ahead and does that. Okay, OCR, again, working behind the scenes. So we have a bunch of images, it's pulling the text out of the images. In this case, you remember earlier I said, what are the things I'm worried about in a migration? One of the things I was worried about is how do I make sure that my sensitive content does not get overshared? And this is where OCR can help. Because OCR will extract the text from images and it will make that text available to DLP policies. And one example of a DLP policy that you might have is restrict access to this document. So you can apply that, and OCR will allow you to protect those image-based documents as well as you would be able to protect a text-based document. Okay, so we have some documents that were in another language, and maybe we want to create translated copies of those documents so that those documents become accessible to more people in your organization. Well, we have a new capability in SharePoint that allows you to translate documents in a couple of clicks. You just select the document, select the language. It translates to over 100 different languages. It's really cool. And you can just select it, and then it'll create that translated copy. And you can do this one by one, or if you have like a policy that every time you get documents that are in a specific language, you need a copy of it in another language, you can set up a rule. And you can say, hey, when the document is identified as this language, create a copy of it in another language and add it to the library, and that'll happen automatically. Okay, so now we talked about how content processing can help. We're going to look at how advanced content management capabilities can complement that to complete the solution. We touched on rules a little bit just now with the translation concept, but here's another example. We said earlier, we need to make sure that when content moves over in a migration, that it goes to the right place. So we saw things where it was like recommending a next action, but it wasn't taking that next action, right? With rules, it can trigger off of the metadata and not just say what the next action is, but actually do the next action. So if we wanted to move the content to a different folder, that let's say we find out that it's invoices and we get all the invoices in one site, in one folder, we can say that when the content type equals invoices, move the file to this folder. And then when they upload it to the drop-off folder, All of that processing happens. We figure out what the content is, and then we move it to the next place. The other thing that you can do is send a notification. So remember we said that we wanted to get approvals from certain people, like, hey, the person who was financing needed to approve it, or we said the vendor manager needed to approve it. So we complement that autofill capability, where it was putting the metadata on the document with a rule that says, if this metadata is added to the document, then notify this person that they need to approve that document. So it's really helping you automate that end-to-end flow. And the supported actions for SharePoint rules today are move the file, send an email, copy the file, or create a translated copy. And this is just like some of the rules you can do right here, simple in the SharePoint UX. Obviously, you can do much more complicated things in Power Automate, keying off of those metadata changes as well. Okay, and this is another one. So we were thinking, do we need to bring everything to SharePoint? I'm not really sure when we do this migration. So one thing that you might think about is, one, do I need to bring it? If I don't need to bring it, get rid of it. The second thing, why do I need to bring it? I need to bring it even though it's kind of inactive content, but I need to keep it for a certain retention period. You might be concerned with like, hey, I have a whole category of content that I'm just keeping for like compliance reasons, for retention, but I don't think anyone's going to be accessing it. It's inactive content. You can free up space in your OneDrive and pay for, basically move this to an archive, which is older tier storage within SharePoint for that kind of content that you don't need to access very frequently, but they are records that you need to keep. And the great thing about M365 Archive is it maintains the security, compliance, search, and metadata features of SharePoint. So what was used in this example? On the content processing side, we saw autofill wearing many hats to classify the document, to summarize the document, and to identify the language of content. We saw OCR that was securing our content to the right set of users, helping our DLP policies be more effective on image-based content. We saw image tags help us figure out what's inside images so that we can automate processes around images. We saw taxonomy tagging take our corporate term set and the things that are important to our, labels that are important to our organization, and automate the application of those. We saw translation allow us to create translated copies with a couple of clicks from within the SharePoint library. We saw premium rules and to allow us to complete the end-to-end solution, so now we're applying the custom metadata and to help us take the next action. And then we saw M365 Archive complement our solution by giving us a place when we migrate that content to put the content that is infrequently accessed but we need to retain. All right, so we talked about two scenarios: business process automation, invoices, and organizing content with the migration. And now Sanjoyan will tell you more about collecting eSignatures.
Okay, so everything is in place, all the documents in place, migrated everything, to eSign. Stamp on that. But before I start, we are building this new capability of eSignature within SharePoint. This is a new offering that we are going to have. Before showing my demo, I'd like to establish why we are doing this. And this flow tells you that in general, there are 4 distinct steps that you do for eSignature before setting up for eSignature. One, you create the document. Okay. Generally, 90% of the cases, you have templates, you use those templates, which ensure they're nice ways to now modify the template and create the agreement and contract that you will send out. So once you do that, of course, you preview the changes to everybody, and you're ready to send it out. At that point in time, on step 3, you now use any popular eSignature service out there, DocuSign, Adobe, and if there are other players that you are already using or your customers are using. In this step, what happens is you need to now upload the content, the PDF file where your agreement contract is there, to the service provider. They will send out to all the recipients. They are going to sign it. Then you have to collect that, and you have to now maintain that, store that. That's my last step. where I need to collect all this information and then bring it back to the secure storage that is in SharePoint, where we have sensitivity, security, retention, and every other governance and compliance that we will talk about. What we are trying to achieve is making this entire process seamless so that for both first party, and we are offering the eSignature service as a first party service provider now, and we are going to show the demo, and also integrating 3D providers, third party providers like and DocuSign as well, without SharePoint or bringing the content back to SharePoint seamlessly. So let's see how this works. Okay. So first we are going to start with the creator flow, where we are going to initiate the eSignature, and then what is the flow for the recipients. Let me play the demo. So this scenario talks about this company Outpost. This is Daisy, and she would like to start this conversation agreement with Carlos, who is from Fabricam, who is outside the organization. It's a very typical scenario that you do. What you can do is, if you notice on top, you are within the SharePoint experience, web experience. You have not yet SharePoint. You click the file. You are, adding all the people that are needed. So you add Daisy, who is one, and then you also add Carlos. We do some color coding to show people who are external. Within the web experience, only you can add the signature fields in the appropriate places. She added initials as well for a clause that got changed and discussed. And then what she's doing is adding an optional message so that the recipient knows that this clause has changed. I need to pay attention before I sign it up. Once it is done, it is sent out. The signature request is sent out. Now, both the recipients, Daisy and Carlos, will get emails. So now, inside the document, this is a very typical e-signature process. Again, within SharePoint, you are still within SharePoint. Experience is our first party offering. Goes ahead, signs, doesn't submit. So the first part is done, first signature is done. Once you finish the signature, you get an email back. And in the last, it says waiting for Carlos to sign. It also tells you what stage of the signature process that you are in. Now, Carlos gets an email from Daisy, goes inside. The first thing is, since the person is external, has to accept terms and conditions, you can actually configure them. Put the signature, date, and initials, and then finishes the process. So now, goes ahead and puts the signature for Carlos and the date. Once this is done, what we are going to see is Daisy will get a response back that the signature is complete by all signatories. Correct. So now, this is changing my view to Daisy. View the signed document. So you can go to the folder. This is the beautiful part. I started from this folder in this library in SharePoint, and the document ended up seamlessly in the same folder after signing back. So the document comes back to the location where we have started from. We show you the request history. We also show you the change management history as well, where we started from. Sorry, at what stages the document had to go through in the assembly process. Now, this is the SharePoint approvals, the Teams approvals app, and this is also one single place to see all your e-signed documents, and you can initiate the same process from within Teams as well, and it will take it the same steps. But the good part is you will see at every stage where the document is there. So it is in pending stage, it is completed stage, and things like that. Now, I will quickly show, this is about our first party experience using SharePoint e-signature process. I will also show what we do for integrating to popular third-party providers as well. So, taking the same scenario where we start your journey from SharePoint, slightly longer video, the e-signature process is an async process. You send out quickly, it takes days, into 2 minutes. Now, notice something. I'll pause you real quick. And I'll show you how these two things appear. Okay. So initially in my first video you saw only eSignature, and now you see names of two external providers. We clearly mentioned these two external providers are there in this tenancy, which is Adobe and DocuSign. As an admin, you can turn this on, and I will show how to turn this on. But assume this is turned on, your investments in these providers are also, the process is similar. You will start, go inside, click on get signatures, choose one, your preferred one for this process. In this example, I'm going to choose DocuSign. This is the difference. Now, you have to log in to DocuSign if you are, or any other security provider. So it takes you, you have your account, you log into the provider, and you have to upload the document. On top you see I uploaded the one to the agreement document. Okay, and then you do the same thing. Put, wherever your signature goes, or your other people that you need to add to the document and things like that. So I just, fast forward and do a screenshot. Yes, and once you do everything, you get the information back. We did integration, API level integration with the providers to bring the signed document back, SharePoint as well. So as a last step, you can click on the folder and say, yes, bring my signed documents back. So this is, in the same folder where the signed documents were, we create a folder by the name of the provider. So it was Adobe, you could have created a folder for Adobe. In case of DocuSign, the same name, and bring the signed documents back to the sender itself. Some benefits, okay, I'll not talk about the benefits of eSignature. Everybody is aware. I'll just give a stat, which is a well-established stat that in North America itself, last year the spending on paper-based documentation by enterprises was 120 billion. So this is a huge market, okay? And then we have a lot of different players and places to grow. The main option for our SharePoint eSignature is to bring all the documents in the trusted place and then provide seamless integration in all the security providers that you already have. I'll quickly go through this slide. This is the capabilities that we are starting right now. So we are starting with simple things. So on your left, these are the basic capabilities that are there today that you can use. Very soon coming, sequential signing, where you can enforce that I want people to sign sequentially and things like that, which are already able to other providers. We are bringing all those capabilities, and then much more coming later this year and next year. Now, the main thing, what will it cost? All the good things. The model is we are using a pay-per-use model. So our time pricing for the first party offering, which is the SharePoint eSignature, native eSignature, is $2 per request. If you don't use it, you don't pay. So that's the model we are adopting right now. And we will learn from the market and grow. So these are something that we started. We are starting with specific nuances across geographies on this. So we are starting with some specific geography, but globally available starting beginning of 2025. With that, I will finish my eSignature scenario and show you the roadmap slide for everything that Shin spoke about and I spoke about. So we will go to our consolidated roadmap slide. You will have this slide after the session, and you get all the information about whatever we spoke about and some demos as well. So I really encourage you guys to download this and use. So I'll finish by showing the QR code for all the other sessions that we are presenting, which are related in this conference. So please scan the QR code so that you can go to some other detailed sessions. We have sessions on contracts and agreement solution that we are launching. Please do visit us in other sessions. Thank you.